Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to have a chat about vintage patterns, and in particular the one that I've just used for my gown for the dressmaker's ball. So the pattern in question is this lovely McCall pattern. It's 8532. Hopefully you can see it. It's a bit bright outside, so I do apologise. And it stole my heart really because of the glorious back detail there, the lovely sort of draped front detail, and these really dramatic sleeves. And I just thought, for something like the dressmaker's ball, it would be perfect. I don't often get to wear anything that kind of swish and posh, so I thought it was just the ticket. If you don't know much about the dressmaker's ball, it's something that a crafty so-and-so hosted here in Leicester, and we all got to get dolled up and enjoy a really lovely evening. The reason I wanted to chat about this particular pattern today is it's from 1935, and I know that often sewing vintage, let alone sort of really old vintage, can put people off because, you know, patterns are single-sized. They often, the pattern pieces aren't actually printed, and the instructions are somewhat lacking as well. So I just wanted to show you an example of a pattern from this era, which is probably a best case scenario where it's nowhere near as scary as you might think, and hopefully it might encourage a few more people to give vintage patterns a go. Anyway, I thought I could start with showing you some of the pattern pieces first, so you can see how they compare to modern patterns. As you can see, these are nice and printed, so you've got your kind of seam lines there. You've got all your notches and various markings, so you know where you're sewing until, and you know where you're going to match pieces up. You've got good instructions on there telling you where to fold under for the hem of the neckline, which is really handy. And this other piece, I also like that with the pleats that you have to make, again, really clear instructions that you're pleating on the solid and bringing it to the dotted line. Really helpful, and again, it tells you where your centre front is and where you're folding things over. So yeah, not very daunting at all, and what you would expect from a modern and indie pattern, hopefully. We'll move on to the instructions now, because they are obviously a little bit different from what we're used to, and I feel nowadays we're really sort of spoon-fed and handheld through all these processes, which is a wonderful thing, but back in the day I think there was a lot of assumed knowledge going on. So this is all you have to go by, just one sort of double-sided page, and you find on the one side everything you would expect to find about cutting instructions, a little bit about grading and making sure you get the right fit, and you've got a really comprehensive cutting layout as well, as you would expect. So all of that stuff's absolutely fine. So when you get to the actual instructions, they're in two sections, and it can be a bit scary to kind of look at that section and go, oh my god, that's all I have to go by. It's quite amusing when you consider what we're used to, but the good thing is that the instructions are clear. They're brief, but they are clear. And one of the other things that I've not really seen before, maybe because I've not ever paid attention in modern patterns, but it says that you join the seams by matching the corresponding notches. The notches in the pattern are numbered in the order in which the seams should be joined, which is pretty cool, because it all, on the instructions, it does, when you look at the notches, they're all numbered, and they're actually numbered on the pattern pieces as well. So you can kind of follow through the instructions and know which bit it corresponds to, which kind of notch it corresponds to by number. So that's a nice touch. And the other good thing as well is that that's kind of like the top bit of the instructions, but then you also have a second part of the instructions, and that's all about finishing, and it kind of takes you through things like different types of seam finishings, how to make bias underfacing, how to sew a sleeve into an armhole. So if you've never like set a sleeve in before, it kind of shows you what that looks like. And interestingly enough as well, it tells you how to make a bound buttonhole. So again, you know, that's very, very brief, and very small, but it kind of is a good starting point, I would say. And you know, most of us are, you know, more than comfortable in Googling and finding alternative sort of, you know, tutorials online, and they are plentiful. So I wouldn't let something like this put you off. It's a really simple pattern, really, in my opinion, and the instructions are pretty good if you're sort of, you know, intermediate or a confident beginner. I'm sure with a little bit of help from the internet you can, you know, absolutely find your way around this pattern really well. So in terms of how I made this pattern my own, I did make a few alterations, and most of them were to do with time saving, and obviously aesthetics as well. So I'll show you the sleeve piece, which reminds me of a ghost. It's a very ghostly sleeve piece, but as you can see, you kind of pleat the bottom of the sleeve and then set it into a cuff, which is very cool, and I was all, you know, happy to do that. Cut it all out, pleated everything, and when it came to trying to set it into the cuff, because the velvet fabric that I used was you know, quite dense, it just created such a thick layer of fabric. It would have looked really lumpy, and it would have been a bit impossible for my machine to handle. So in the end, what I had to do, annoyingly, was to kind of cut around these pieces, or just within this kind of like jaggedy edge, to make it a bit of a smooth curve, so a bit like a semicircle curve, and then I gathered the sleeves into the cuff. So you still get the full drama of the really full sleeves, which is great, but slightly less bulk, and that worked out quite well. The other thing I did to save time, and I feel a little bit bad about it, but I didn't make a bound buttonhole in the back. I just did a machine buttonhole. It's not the neatest, it doesn't look amazing. My machine didn't like doing it at first, so I had to unpick a bit. So had I had a bit more time, I think, you know, bound buttonhole would have made it look a lot nicer, but the effect is still there, and it doesn't take too much away from the pattern, and my long hair kind of covers it most of the time, so that's fine. And the third change I made was to the skirt, because I don't really think the sort of bias cut clingy styles of the 1930s really suit my body at all. So what I decided to go for instead was a kind of like half circle skirt, and for that I used a trusty indie pattern. It's Blue Ginger Doll Violet Dress, which I really love, actually. Love this pattern. And it's for knits as well, so I thought it would work well with what I was already making. And I just took the kind of circle skirt they say it is, but it's definitely more of a half circle skirt pattern, and extended it so it was floor length. And that all went together really well. What I found with the floor length though, and I did have my heart set on a floor length gown, I just wanted it to be like really swishy and glam, but because of the fabric that I chose, not only the colour but the kind of like drape of it, I just felt like a theatre curtain, like an old school theatre curtain in it. In the end I decided to kind of shorten it and have it as T length, or more mid shin length, and I feel that works a bit better for my stature. I know it's not the kind of dress that would be to everybody's taste, you know, it could be perceived as a little bit costumey, and I certainly felt it might be a bit costumey, but I'm really glad that I wore it to the ball in the end, because I would have been totally underdressed otherwise, and if you can't wear a dress like that to that kind of event, I really don't know when you're going to. Yeah, that's a kind of brief little guide and a tour inside McCall 8532. I hope it was interesting and or helpful, and I hope that maybe it's inspired a few people to have a go and, you know, get stuck into patterns from this era. I'm going to do more of these as part of Vintage Pledge. So this was not only my first Vintage Pledge make of the year, it was also my first time using a 1935 pattern, or one from the 1930s. So, you know, if you find this kind of thing useful, interesting, let me know in the comments, and I'm happy to keep sharing these little vlogs as I work my way through my own Vintage Pledge, which this year is to sew at least one garment from my favourite decades. So I've done the 30s and I've got the 40s, 50s and early 60s to go, and I also threw a 1970s pattern in there as well, just to mix up things and to take me out of my comfort zone. If there's anything specific that you'd like to see covered around vintage patterns, again, let me know. I'm not an expert at all, but together maybe we can muddle through. And I'll also include the details of Vintage Pledge if you don't already know what it is, and you haven't signed up and you think you might like to. Please join us. It's a year-long challenge, and it's really good fun, and it's also really inspiring. But anyway, thank you so much for watching today, and I hope to see you soon. Bye!